Welcome everyone, Daniel Yuck here. Thank you all for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Today I want to go ahead and I want to show you all how I approach stipple shading, pepper shading, whip shading. I'm going to go ahead and touch base on all of that within this video right here. I'm going to go ahead and try and keep this video as informative and as simple as possible for you to understand on your end. So we have some designs here. For this specific video, we're going to go ahead and we're going to be utilizing this flower right here. Just a simple, nice design, so that way I can go ahead and show you all the points and demonstrate here real time on the information I'm trying to give you all. So let's just dive into this here. This approach, whenever I approach stipple shading, whip shading, pepper shading, it's always a specific flow that I follow, and I always use a 3-round liner. Me personally, I enjoy using a bug pin 3-round liner over a standard 3-round liner, just because I can get more fine with my shading. I can go ahead and get a little bit more accurate. That's why I choose to go bug pin over standard. This is going to be fully subjective. If you prefer standard over bug pin, by all means, you're going to want to go ahead and you're going to want to start off with a 3-round liner for the actual pepper shading, stipple, whip. You're going to want to use a tight, small needle configuration, and a 3-round liner is ideal for me, at least. Now, for this tattoo, I'm going to be using Rain tattoo needles, and I'm going to be using a standard 9-round shader, as you can see right here, to outline this tattoo right here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and switch over to a time lapse. I'm going to go ahead and outline this tattoo, and then we're going to go ahead and come back to the video, and I'm going to go ahead and explain real time here for you all on the different techniques and flow that I follow. And I just want to go ahead and touch base on some points upon shading here. So let's go ahead and dive over into the time lapse. Let's get the outline going. After that, we're going to come back and we're going to dive right into the stipple shading. Okay, so the outline is now done, and as you all can see, it came out great. I love the way that these bold outlines look like that. You do got to get used to lining with the shader, but nonetheless, that just comes with time and practice. As you all can see, the outline came out great. We didn't blow it out. This is a really thin skin, as you all can see. I have a full review on these practice skins as well. It came out great. What we can go ahead and do now is jump in over to the bug pin 3-round liner, and I can go ahead and kind of show you all some techniques on how I approach stipple shading and the different variables to consider upon shading with in this manner, so to speak. So when I approach stipple shading, there's many variables to consider, and when I say that, I mean like voltage. So right now I did this outline right here at 7.9 volts with a 9-round shader, a standard 9-round shader. Right now I have a bug pin 3-round liner, and I am at 7.9 still. This is going to be way too fast to push this small of a needle configuration. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to drop this down to about 5 volts. So I'm going to drop it to about 5. I could fluctuate anywhere between 5 volts to 5.5. Now, before I continue and say why I dropped it low on voltage, I am using the CNC Q2. This is going to be the WX2 wireless power supply, and this is going to be a Rain bug pin 3-round liner. So the reason why I dropped my voltage down to 5 so low is because it is, when I say so low, I mean like so low in the voltage range, is because when you're stippling, you want the needle to hit at different points. So you don't want to make a solid line. So if you match your hand speed and you move your hand speed quicker with the needle in a low voltage, what the needle is going to go ahead and do is the needle is going to go ahead and puncture dots in a line, so to speak. So when your voltage is low and you're swiping with the fast hand speed, you're going to go ahead and see a series of dots gets created. So let me go ahead and actually just show you that real quick, what I mean by that. Let me do a quick demonstration here. Let's see if I can actually zoom in for you all. Okay, so when I say moving your hand speed to match the 5 voltage range, you're gonna go ahead and see some dots. This is just gonna be practice right here in order to, you know, get used to this. I will go ahead and make another video on how I find form and how I shade things, but for now I'm trying to teach you all the technique of stippling, whip shading, and how I approach it. So right here, I'm gonna go ahead and show you all, and we're zoomed in. I'm gonna go ahead and match my hand speed to this voltage. And as you all can see, we're getting left with a series of dots. That is what stipple shading looks like. Now, there's different techniques within stipple shading. So you can do like whip shading, which is where you start and whip out, like you see right here that I did on some of these, like so, where it has that sort of motion. That's whip shading. Stipple shading is where you're, I mean, some say where you manually put in the dots, but I just refer to that as manual stippling. I say stipple shading would be somewhere along the lines of like that, where you're not whipping your machine out. You're simply putting in the lines. And as you see, the hand speed that I'm moving at creates these dot-like effects. And as you start layering with this method, it starts shading, so to speak. You'll see layers and layers of shading start building up. And this approach is not traumatic to the skin at all. You can go ahead and pass some more times than you normally would have, let's say over pulling lines or even different types of shading where you have a full gray wash set. I didn't even mention that for this here, I am using straight black. There is no gray wash set at all. It's just a straight black. What I'm depending on is the speed of my hand, the voltage of the machine, and the pressure that I'm putting the stipples into. I'm not applying a lot of pressure. I'm not trying to pull saturated lines. I'm actually just scraping over the top of the skin when I'm doing this. So stippling, in my opinion, would be this right here, where you're not really whipping your machine out, but you're still getting those dot-like textures. I would say that's more of like stipple shading. Whip shading is looking something like this, where you're whipping out the tail of the lines or the shading that you're pulling in, where you're visibly whipping it out. You can actually see when I'm doing that. So we're whipping it out right there. And as you can see, some would call that whip shading. And basically, this is the approach. It's not too difficult. I think what is the hard part is finding the form on the objects that you're shading is half the battle as well. And then the other half the battle would be mastering the technique to apply this sort of look right here, to apply this specific technique right here. So we're gonna go ahead and keep doing that. So there you all have it. I'm just pulling lines and I'm matching my hand speed to the voltage right now, and it's allowing me to get this dot-like texture, as you all can see right here. It's very difficult to explain while I'm doing it real time here, so I'm doing as best I can to get my points across right here. And I'm not pressing down at all. As you can see, I'm not driving the needle into the skin right here. I'm literally just letting it balance, letting it sit over the skin, and just scraping it into the skin like you see right here. And as you can see, we're starting to get a real nice gradient effect here, real nice shading tone. So, you know, you can go ahead and keep going. The darkness is going to be subjective, like how saturated you want your shades. That's going to be subjective. Right now, I'm just trying to go ahead and get my technique across right here. Now, you do have to be careful. I don't recommend going straight to human skin and practicing this technique. I recommend practicing on practice skin until you've mastered it, because if you're going too deep upon pulling these lines, you can definitely damage the skin. You want to avoid damaging the skin at all costs. That's like the worst case scenario. So you definitely want to get used to this technique before you actually put it to use. And there's other motions like sweeping motions, for example. You can do sweeping motions, and a sweeping motion would consist of the same technique where you're moving your hand according to the speed to get that dot effect, but you're going to go ahead and be sweeping back and forth. So the needle is going to go in and out, and each time it hits the skin, it's going to whip on each side back and forth, as opposed to whipping out on one side. So what that looks like, it looks like this. And I'm also going to do a cross hatch right here as well while I show you all this. So as you all can see, that's more of like, I mean, that would be technically whipping as well, but I just wanted to go ahead and show you all that motion as well. That is another way to go ahead and approach that. So I think it just depends on the specific image at hand. That's what's going to determine which style you're going to be using a lot. Or it could just be you and how you want to approach things. Everyone's going to be different. Like the motions that I'm using on this flower may not be the same motions that you were going to use. So try not to get too technical with it. Find what feels comfortable with you on your end and what looks good as well. And those were brush-like motions when we're moving in and out like that. And as you can see, I'm following the form of the petal as well as I do this. And we're getting a real nice gradient shaded effect here now, as you can see it over, you know, adding layers and layers of stipples here, of dots. I'll go ahead and even zoom it up close more so that way you can see the dots and what they actually look like up close. And then what you would do is simply, with these techniques, you would continue the process all the way until the image is done. So let's go ahead and do some more whips and stipples right here. So typically I start with the layer. Like, you can go ahead and start with the whip stipple. I don't really think it matters. You're still gonna get to where you're going. So for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and start with some whips right here. As you all can see, I'm visibly whipping the needle out, coming to the end of it right here. And I'm pushing the stipples up until the rim of the flower. And as I keep doing this, you're gonna start seeing it form as you start cross hatching and applying different techniques for the stippling. Sometimes I even go as far as like doing this little part right here, just to give it some more saturation right here in the under the petals. And as you can see, I'm moving my hand speed so that way I get these dots out. I'm moving my hand speed fast enough to give me this dot effect. If I don't move my hand speed fast enough, then I'm not gonna get this effect and it's not gonna look like shading. In this process, you're definitely gonna wanna be patient. You're not gonna wanna rush this at all. Make sure that each line, each stipple, each whip that you're putting in means something to the tattoo. Don't, rush it. Don't be impatient, especially if this is going to be a style of tattooing that you're going to specialize in, then you're gonna have to work on some patience as well upon applying these sort of tattoos. Because as you can see, I'm visibly putting in line by line by line. And essentially it's coming down to, in the macro, it's dot by dot by dot. If you actually look up close, I can even slow it down for you all, do a little slow-mo for a little bit so you guys can see the actual dots here. It's literal dot by dot by dot. Some people would even go as far as, doing manual stipples, which is like that. But for me specific, I think majority of the time I'm either going to be whipping or straight stippling with, a straight stipple approach, as I showed you all earlier, like this. With really not so much whipping out at the end, just dot to dot, as you all can see. So I use those two techniques pretty much often, and then I also use the brush motion as well when I'm cross hatching, as I showed you all right here. I use all three techniques to get this sort of gradient look. So I basically run through the process of, like, I'll start with the whips, and then I just build up, and then as I'm building up, the technique changes. So let me go ahead and show you all. So right now we're just whipping it out still right here. Whipping. And then from this point forward, what I would go ahead and do is I would start brushing, like right here, all the way out as well. And then just start brushing out like that, back and forth. And each time I do that, the needle is going out, in, out, in, out, in, out. And the process repeats like so. Let me go ahead and take it off, rub this off, see how it's looking. And as you can see, we're getting a great grading effect right here. It's looking really, really nice. And this process, again, you would just repeat it on every portion of the tattoo. What it really comes down to is having that low voltage, and it's having that proper hand speed to match with the correct needle configuration. If you have the variables right with the correct needle configuration, you have the right voltage and the right hand speed, then this shouldn't take you too long to pick up on. But this is just the way that I do it. I don't feel like this is by any means right or wrong or the only way to do it. I just wanted to go ahead and show you all and share with you all and let you all see me perform this real time right here, as a lot of you all have been asking me how I do this specific approach, how I get the shading that I get. And as you all can see, I'm just literally building it up. There's nothing special going on. It's just a lot of patience, a lot of dots, lots and lots and lots of dots. And that is the trick behind it. It's just literally having patience and doing it over and over and over until you get the desired effect. And I want it to be darker right here, so I'm doing this part right here, as you all can see. You can even hit it with another layer if you like. On this one, I'm gonna go ahead and whip it out a little bit more. And as you can see, we are getting to where we're going. This is coming out great. It's looking fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and walk you all through it real time here. I'm gonna let you all see real time as opposed to switching over to a time lapse. So that way you can kind of get more out of the video here. I'll go ahead and probably do speed it up, fast forward it, so that way you guys can see it still real time, but just a little bit quicker, so that way the video doesn't run on too long. So right here on this part, I'm simply following the form of this flower right here. As you can see, I'm not touching any edge of the actual flower. I'm actually staying right in between this petal right here. So let me go ahead and put a little bit more ink, and I'm gonna show you all. I'm actually staying right in between here. I'm not sure if you all can see that, but I am not touching the actual petal outline. So as I start building, you're gonna notice that there's gonna be shading, but on the outside of that shading, you're gonna see a little outline, which is gonna be the negative space. And we can go ahead and cross hatch as well. And then you wanna go ahead and give it some, I can go ahead and do some brush-like motions right here. The brush-like motions really come in handy when there's like larger spaces to fill. That's really where I use the brush motions. As you can see, like over here on this side of the petal, this is a larger area, so you can go ahead and do the brush-like motions right here. And again, when I'm doing these brush-like motions, the needle is going in, out, in, out, in, out, and I'm whipping, and it's coming up and down like that. It's not straight lines back and forth. So as you can see, this is building and we have that negative space around there, which is looking really, really nice right here. I'm going to give it a few more brushes at the bottom right here. I want this bottom part to be a little bit more darker. Now, if you do this correctly, it should be minimal damage to the skin when you're done. Now, when it's healing, it should just get a little flaky and, you know, peel a little bit, and that's pretty much it. It shouldn't be too bad. Stipple shading doesn't really take too long to heal, as opposed to like some tattoos that are just pure line work or something to that extent. Those take a bit longer, but in terms of like how abrasive is for this style of shading on the skin, it's really easy on the skin, basically, so to speak. Stipple shading is super easy on the skin. It's not really abrasive. Sorry, I'm trying to do this and talk at the same time. But yeah, that's why I love this effect. And on top of that, I love the textured look of it. It looks great on skin. And then we're gonna go ahead and repeat that process. We're just gonna keep it going. And right here on this big petal, I can go ahead and use more of brush-like motions right here. I will go ahead and make an entirely different video and show you all how I see form and why I put the shading where I put it. If you were interested, be sure to go ahead and drop a comment below and I can go ahead and show you all how I find form. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get that done for you all as well. As you can see, I'm just filling the space here where I see fit. And where I'm putting the shading isn't probably the places where you would put the shading. That's going to be different from tattooist to tattooist. Everyone is going to view and perceive light differently. So yeah, to each their own. This is where I feel the shading would look nice. And that is the beauty of art as well. It's subjectiveness. Something that may look great to you may look horrible to somebody else, or vice versa. You get my drift. Over here, I want this to be darker as well. And right here, as I'm whipping out right there, you can kind of like hear the differences too. Whipping has a certain sound, brushing has a certain sound, and even just putting straight stipple lines has a certain sound as well. Like this is kind of what whipping sounds like. That's what that whipping sounds like. And then brush motions sound something like this. And straight stipple lining sounds like this. So there is audible differences. So if you're listening to it, you can hear the differences, and the sound would help you determine, you know, what style of shading that is. Now, I could be a little bit off in terms of my terminology, but for the most part, that's how I view this technique right here. That's how I look at it. And I'm just gonna go ahead and continue doing what I'm doing here, filling the space where I see fit. Those were all whip shades. Whipping. And that is the idea. Basically, wherever you're starting the lining from, wherever you're starting the stipple from, that's gonna be the area that gets dark first. So be cautious of that. Be mindful of where you start and finish. That is gonna be everything. So up here, I want the top part of this to be a little bit darker. So there's a couple of ways that I could approach that. I can do some brush motions up here, like so. Go ahead and remove this. And I can also just do some whips right here going down in this little area. Like so. And we're still gonna get the desired effect. So if you notice, I'm working just off the tip of my needle upon doing these tattoos. Like I'm just using the tip. I am not putting too much of the needle in there. We're literally just working off the tip of the needle, which allows us to get this dot-like gradient effect. So remember that you're only working off the tip of your needle. You're not putting the needle too much into the skin. I don't want to mislead you all or deceive you all. It's just literally the tip of the needle. Remember that. I can't exhaust that enough. Don't go and stipple like you would do lining. And then we can go ahead and just keep continuing. On this one, I'm gonna go ahead and whip it out this way. from my experience, I've seen different people classify like stippling and pepper shading differently. So, you know, if I'm confusing you, I definitely do apologize here. This is just the way that I look at it yet again. And this is how I would approach it. And this is honestly my go-to style of shading. This is my go-to. I don't like the soft shading or the surrealism shading where you have like multiple gray wash sets as well. I mean, I'm just not a fan of that approach. I like this textured approach. I like the way that this style looks over, you know, realism and stuff. But again, to each their own. When I see some people execute realism correctly, it looks amazing. But for me, I'm more on the lining side, like specialized in like mandalas, fine lines. So this approach, stippling, would be more beneficial for me as a tattooist, as opposed to trying to do surrealism or hyperrealism and stuff like that. As you can see, we're doing some brushes here again. I guess that would technically be whip shading as well, because you are whipping in and out, in and out. That's why I'm saying, like, forgive the terminology that I'm using to classify these specific techniques that I'm showing you all. But nonetheless, this would be stipple, pepper, whip shading. As you can see, when you start doing it and you start getting used to the motions, it almost becomes second nature on how you move the machine to get the dots to line up with your hand speed. It becomes second nature. It's not too hard to get in groove matching your hand speed with the voltage. Just gotta do a little bit of practice and then you'll be good to go. It's real easy to get comfortable with this technique. Now, one thing that you would want to do is you definitely want to crosshatch. Don't be afraid to crosshatch and stack your layers over each other. You don't want to stay in the same direction the entire shade. You want to go ahead and throw some crosshatching in there to kind of, you know, fill it out, make it more interesting and add more textures as well as details. It's just, for me, crosshatching just visibly looks better. It visually reads nice upon looking at the tattoo. As you can see, we're getting a real smooth effect here. So it's gonna be light right there. I didn't do much. Now, as you can see, with the 3-round liner, you can get really accurate to where you want to put the ink. Like, you can put it exactly where you want to put the ink. And that's another reason why I love this specific technique, because the accuracy is amazing. I love working with this small of a needle configuration and shading. For me, it's just my workflow that I'm comfortable with, but everyone's different. You're probably gonna like soft shading over stipple. You may like stipple like me. Everyone's gonna be different. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually just fast forward here, and then we'll go ahead and come back and I'll go ahead and show you all this up close. All right, so as you all can see, we're getting a very nice gradient stipple-like effect. I'm going to zoom out, and this is what it looks like when you zoom out. You get a very nice, soft, like shading. You can't really see the dots when you're reading the tattoo, like even from this far, but as you zoom in, you can definitely start seeing all the details and the makeup of the actual gradiency, the saturation of the tattoo. And that is the idea of stippling. It's a very, very smooth and textured effect, and that's why I chose this specific style. But not only that, I chose it because of the patience that it requires to apply this specific technique and do it correctly. Now, as you all can see, it's actually coming out really, really nice. I'm happy with that. For the sake of this video time, I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna switch over to a time-lapse mode, and then we're gonna go ahead and come back, and then I'll go ahead and touch base on anything else that I may need to touch base on, and then we can kind of close out the video from there. Okay, so I'm gonna bring you all an up close look here, and I'm gonna see if I can show you all these motions a little bit better. Let me go ahead and try and demonstrate a little bit better. Let me go ahead and try and demonstrate here a whipping motion. I am holding my camera, so just be forgiving here. So this is more of a whip style motion, and you'll still get that pepper gradient effect. And as you can see, I was actually whipping it out on each one. That's an approach that you can take. I just want to go ahead and show you that motion. This is, I guess, straight stippling, where your hand speed and your dot work are aligned to where you're not whipping it out. You're just simply putting in the dots in and out each and every time. There's no whip out. There's no, you know, you wouldn't be able to have an apparent end to the whip, so to speak. And then a brush-like motion, which is what I would use for this right here, this leaf, is in and out. So as you can see, on here, I'm going into the skin and out, and the same motion back and forth, in and out, in and out, in and out. And that is the motions that I'm taking there, as you all can see. Let's see if I can bring the brightness down a little bit. Just go and try it on this leaf. And it's very, very difficult to actually do this while I'm holding my phone, but I wanted to give you all really an up close look here and show you all these motions and try and better explain for those that didn't really understand from the top view. Let me go ahead and do a few more. Right here, we're whipping it out. And I'm not really applying much pressure at all. You can see them right here. So that one's more like we're just whipping the dots out, so that way it doesn't have an apparent start and finish. And that way it kind of fades out as well, as you can see. And then you can do brush-like motions. Either way, you're gonna get to where you're going. I guess overall, that's why they call it pepper shading, because it still looks like that. But within, I guess, pepper shading, there's specifics. Now, again, my terminology could be wrong in terms of what the applications actually are. Like this brush, what I'm calling brush could be called something else. This is just how I classify and how how I'm trying to get my point across within this video here. And this is more whipping because I'm going in one direction. I'm actually just moving this way, but I'm moving at a faster speed, so you can't really tell. And this angle may not be great at all. It's probably horrible, but I'm doing the best that I can here while I'm holding the camera. Let's actually go ahead and put it back up top, so that way we can go ahead and get a better view of the rest of the tattoo here. Alright, so as you all can see, those are pretty much the three motions that I'm using to get this tattoo done. I'm just whipping, I'm using a whip, I'm using just straight dots on some parts, and I'm using brush-like motions, and that's how I'm getting this tattoo finished. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just finish out this tattoo, and as I'm finishing it out, I'm just going to call out the motions that I'm using, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can zoom in up close more for you all. Bear with me. Alright. Right now, I am whipping the lines towards me, covering these this side of the leaf right here, as you can see. And right now, I am doing another whipping motion, but in a different direction, which would be, I guess, a crosshatch technically. And then you're just gonna repeat that process until you get your desired gradient effect. You know, you get your darkness how you want it. For now, I'm using a brushing motion. Right now, I'm using a brushing motion as well. Right now, I am whipping lines out one by one, right there. I'm gonna go ahead and do that again until I get the desired saturation that I'm looking for. And I'm gonna go ahead and repeat that process as well. I'm just gonna go ahead and do whips right here as well, out away from me, to get the desired gradiency or the desired saturation there. And then I'm gonna do some smaller ones right here to concentrate on the area that I want. So if I want to concentrate on a specific area, I just make the stipple lines, the whips out a little bit shorter over the whole petal. It's just little things like that that I would pay attention to upon approaching it like this, or when I do approach it with stipples. Just be patient. As you can see, I'm putting in line by line, dot by dot. It all starts to add up though if you're making the right choices. And then for the leaves here, let's go ahead and do some right down the middle. And right here, I'm using brushing motions. To fill this spot. And I'm gonna go ahead and use whips, going the same way as the leaf right here, in the smaller concentrated area. And I'm only using the tip of my needle. And then I'm gonna go ahead and repeat that on this side of the leaf. Right now I'm using whips and I'm just going down on this side of the leaf right here. I'm not going up or down, I'm just moving in one fluid motion downwards like this. And in a bit, I'm gonna go ahead and cross hatch it the same way, this way. So as you can see, I'm using those three techniques that you could say, I guess, three approaches to get this done. I'm not using anything fancy. I'm just taking my time, making sure each line I put in actually counts and is contributing to the overall tattoo, that it's gonna read well when it's done. Let me go ahead and fast forward here the rest of this, so that way this video doesn't go on until like 3 days. So as you all can see now, the tattoo is done. It looks great. It reads really, really well. What's very interesting and what I personally like about this approach for shading is that it reads in two different formats, so to speak. And when I say that, what I mean is from a distance, it looks really, really smooth. And mind you, this is just straight black ink with putting dots into, you know, specific areas over and over and layering dots to look this way. So at a distance, it looks really, really soft and smooth. And mind you, again, we did use just straight black ink, but when you zoom in, you can actually see the textures and you can see the dots there as well. I could probably even pick it up and bring it closer for you all. So when we get like really up close, you can even see the lines from the needle configuration, but focus on the gradients and values of the dots that we put in there, and look at the way the dots added up to make up this shading. Now at first I didn't think that this was something that I was capable of doing, but I've been practicing this specific technique for months, and as you can see, I'm starting to improve quite tremendously here. To me, this looks smooth, it looks great. If this tattoo was on me, I'd be happy with it. It's a solid tattoo. Up close, you could see the textures and you could see everything going on there. And then again, at a distance, it looks really, really smooth. I think that's really cool. I love the way that this specific style of shading looks. Okay, a quick video recap real quick for you all. The approach is you're going to want to have a bug pen or standard 3-round liner. You're going to want to go ahead and drop your voltage down to low 5s. That's where I had mine at 5 on the dot this entire tattoo. So I was using 5 volts. Find your area where you're comfortable with. Some may do it from 5 to 7. I've seen people use 7.5 and still have this sort of approach. It's all going to vary on you and your hand speed and how you feel comfortable putting in the dots. So go ahead, mess with voltages and mess with your hand speeds and get some practice skins and find your sweet spot. And you're gonna go ahead and, you know, you're gonna own in on that really quickly. That shouldn't take you too long. So once you go ahead and do that, once you get comfortable with the voltage and your speed, and once you're able to actually pull effective and smooth gradiencies, then go ahead and apply that to images. Start doing flowers, I recommend, and put the shades where you think you should put them. Upon doing that though, make sure that you're practicing patience and consistency as well, so that way you get a cohesive look when you are done. Because if you're not going to be consistent with each and every individual line and dot that you put in, then it's going to look a bit wonky. So it's very, very important that you're super consistent and that you do take your time. It is very, very important. Keep in mind that this approach is putting in dot by dot by dot by dot. So therefore, it is going to take longer. So you need to have some patience when doing this. Just remember, you're going to be doing dot by dot by dot. But in the end, the tattoos heal nice, they look great, and they are awesome. So that is pretty much the fundamentals and the foundation that I work off of to approach this sort of style of shading. And I appreciate you all tuning in this long. If I didn't touch base on something specific that you may have wanted to know at some point throughout this video, by all means, drop it in the comments down below. I'm going to do my best to guide you in the best possible direction. If you're not, be sure to give me a follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as I would genuinely appreciate your support, all under the same name at Daniel Yuck, DanielYuck. Yet again, I do appreciate you tuning in this long. You have a great day.